Irina, who's the product marketing lead for the consumer products over at LinkedIn, and she's been kind enough to run this session for us, running through a few of the answers to a lot of submitted questions we have around LinkedIn profiles, how to get more people to read them, perhaps notice them, perhaps what's be distributed across LinkedIn. And we decided to record this as some people in Europe mentioned it's a bit late for them. So without further ado, let me go turn it over to Irina to do a large introduction, and we'll just moderate this chat. Irina.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very nice to meet 23 of you from all over the world, and hopefully to those who tune in later on the recording, please feel free to connect to me and reach out with any follow-up questions as well. So I'm somewhat of a LinkedIn veteran, so I started working at LinkedIn back in 2011 when it was just 1,200 people, and the company just grew and grew. And so in my past, so now I'm on the consumer side of the business, but in the past, my experience for over a decade was in marketing, and specifically marketing products and double-sided marketplaces. And so I managed the online advertising platform that LinkedIn has. And so as I was processing and thinking through some of your questions, I'll reflect back at the experience that I had both on the B2B side, but also help you with your profile, your transitions, any kind of moments that you may be going through right now, and answer any questions. One thing that I will kind of disclaimer is I'm not a recruitment expert, but I will do all I can in my best power to provide the guidance that I've seen based on what I've seen from previous experience. And if there are any questions that I'm not able to answer, I'll make sure to follow up with either links where you can learn more from experts, resources that you can follow and get more information, or simply I can tag in one of my coworkers and they can help you out if they're the expert in the field. But let's go ahead and get started.
Cool. Thank you, Irina. So I guess the first question really came to mind is during this time, people are worried about their jobs, they're trying to get new jobs, they're trying to perhaps even get some side jobs as an advisor. What overall feedback do you have in terms of how to use LinkedIn the most effectively possible?
Of course. So I saw some of the questions that came in initially. Let's start with the profile first. And if your profile has some cobwebs on it, go on in, reset your password if you forgot it. Our support team will be able to help you and assist you there. And brush off. So some of the tips that I'll have around there is include an image. The image should represent you in your authenticity. Don't worry about the suits and the ties and the very formal wear. It should be you and represent you, of course, in a appropriate context, but it should be you so that people can actually see you and who you are. And if you have an image, you're actually 21 times more likely to have your profile be viewed and 9 times more likely to have a connection. So if you don't have a profile, there's some great tools in the app. So download the app and it'll make your profile photo look beautiful, and you can take a photo wherever you are, whether it's a selfie, and you can make it look professional. So that's the first, get your image uploaded. The second is there's a headline portion. So your headline doesn't actually have to be what your job title is. It's short and sweet, and it should be a combination of what you do or what you're passionate about inside and outside of work, and where you're going, or the special value that you're contributing. And you can update those and see how they're working. Ask your friends or coworkers for their input. And then make sure you add your certification, your education. If you're more sensitive around the date, you don't have to put the dates in for your graduation. I personally keep mine out, but what I have is the focus that I had, the experience that I developed, any kind of training that I've done, and my education was many moons ago at this point in time. And I also added any certifications that I have, especially if you are pivoting in your career. One of the things that I'll recommend is if you can get into volunteer work in an area where you're trying to go towards, at least so that you can develop the industry lingo or the industry expertise. And most of the time, the way that profiles are searched for on LinkedIn, so by recruiters, they basically have 3 tools more or less at their disposal. One is the free search, the way that we would search for each other and look up our profiles and see what we're all about. The second is through groups. So a lot of recruiters will go into groups, especially different types of association groups or interest groups, and see what type of content people are posting, what kind of conversations they're having, just to have that human connection. And the third is they have a recruitment tool on LinkedIn. And so what that tool allows them to do is search by things like years of experience and job titles and search related keywords tied in a Boolean logic. And so if you can have your profile, your headline reflect where you want to go, your experience be up to date on where you've been and your years of experience, and your summary reflect the keywords that relate to where you want to go, you'll be much more likely to pop up in searches. And so one tip that I've used and I till this day use is I'll either in my network or I'll just search for folks who I aspire to be like, and I'll see what's in their profile and what they have filled out and what are the things they're proud of. I'm a very examples driven person, and so it's always fun to see. And sometimes I'll go and I'll find an engineering manager has some really great way to explain how they manage their team of 16 people that I probably wouldn't have thought about. And so that's how I try to benchmark and see what my profile looks like.
So just to confirm, sorry, Irina, to
Yeah,
confirm,
no, please go for it.
the profile sort of introduction can be aspirational. It's not about this is my background. It can be really aspiration. That's what you suggest.
Absolutely. And it should be complete. That's the more complete your profile is, the more you're going to end up being in search terms. And it should reflect your years of experience with the purpose of where you're trying to go. So if I'm in product marketing, but I want to move into product management, I'll update the descriptions of what I did and some of the projects that I worked on with the lens of what would a product leader who's looking for a great product manager be looking into. Or if I have been in marketing, but I want to pivot into software engineering, I'll lean on the courses, the boot camps, the volunteer work that I've done, the potentially like girls who code workshops, or any kind of relevant work and experience where you still want to be able to showcase your experience. So it's not a lie. It's you're leaning on who you are and where you've been, but also if you have an aspiration to go somewhere, put that in there.
No, and the headline, what really should be the headline? Like, let's perhaps use yours as an example so people can get a better sense of you, but also perhaps what they should be using. Should it be just a summary of their current job, what they're trying to do in the future? I love your headline actually in terms of how you're building products, right?
Building products people love.
Yeah.
And you know, I bring them to, I do so many things. I bring them to market, I do research, I do that, but I don't dabble in that. What drives me is products that people love, products that make people's lives better. And so if you're an engineer, you can always, you know, have something like code master and professional chef. Like you can have a combination of what you do and a little tweak of something about you, because at the end of the day, and one of the questions was like, how different should your LinkedIn profile be from your resume? From an accuracy perspective, it should be accurate. From a connection, a human connectedness, there should be more there. That when let's say you and I are going to have an interview, if you have a little more things in your profile that it just gives me a glimpse into you as a person, that allows us to have an interesting conversation, not about your experience, but some of the things that you potentially overcame.
No, that makes sense. And in terms of, as you said, in your university, you don't put your year graduate. That's fine. You don't need to do that. I think that's perfect.
And one of the things that I noticed, or some of the questions that I had, and I have some of the notes here as well, was around age sensitivity. And if when I believe the question was to the sentiment of how do I compete with a younger workforce? And my advice there, especially when it comes from a profile, would be your experience is your biggest asset. And if you've been through recessions in the past, and if you've been through, let's say, taking an engineering example, there are language codes that will be updated, but what won't be and what will reflect in your profile are the projects that you worked on that ended up evolving, or you had to pivot, or your team grew and then it got downsized. And so the more that you can pull through, one, the experience that transfers to the next role, your experience and how it makes you stronger and actually more resilient and more flexible. And then the third, which is going to be really important, it is the capacity to grow and to learn. Because at that point in time, it's not about the age or what kind of, it's really about the experience and your willingness to learn and to be able to adapt to new environments, especially as the world evolves. And so
Okay.
that was my kind of guidance there.
Thank you. So since everyone worked at Google, the question people always have is about the algorithm, right? And can you share more about the LinkedIn algorithm in terms of how people can actually optimize their own profile based on what the LinkedIn algorithm is actually pulling, perhaps to be featured in front of recruiters and hiring managers?
So the algorithm is actually for this particular one, and I also have the feed algorithm as well, because I know that was important to folks too. So we'll start with the profile. Completeness is super important. So making sure you have your start and end dates, making sure you have your skills and your education and your profile and your summary. So completeness is one. And the second one is variable, and it depends. The search Boolean logic basically, as Googlers and ex-Googlers, like SEO relevance algorithms. So the more you can tie in, if you're a sales professional and you just have sales, but then someone is looking for an account developer, an account rep, or regional manager, tie in who you are from all the different types of keywords that could potentially be searched by you. Put yourself in a position of the recruiter who is searching for the positions that you want, and ensure that the SEO of your profile is spot on. I have a resource that I'll share with this group. It's called Rock Your Profile. It's a LinkedIn learning course. And there are some really great tips there as well. So I'll be sure to send that out. But from an algorithm perspective, completeness, and get your SEO down.
Yeah, so completeness, and then in terms of the entire profile, every single section being completed, put as many, sounds like your experience as possible, not only for what you've done in the past in your full-time job, perhaps other projects you've worked on, so that it does get picked up by the algorithm.
Yeah, because you do. So the years of experience that you have add up. So if you have significant gaps, or you're like, well, I'm not going to put in like the first 10 jobs that I had, you potentially are coming off as you have 10 years of experience if you're missing an entire section of your previous employment. So that was one. And then the one section that I think, just like we do with Yelp, we review restaurants and storefronts. Reach out to your coworkers, your past coworkers, and ask for recommendations. You'd be surprised how eager and flexible and welcoming people are to give these recommendations, and it just adds more color. You basically have a 5-star review on your profile.
That makes sense.
And that is also SEO.
And to follow up on in terms of the completeness, a question that came in was talking about internships. If someone's been out already for 5 to 10 years, should they still list their internships that they've had, or how should they actually be listing their details from back when they were in college?
Internships will usually be like 1 to 2 years, so it's not going to be significantly impacting. But if you have, let's say you're a career pivoter, right, and you worked there for 5 years and then another company for 3 to 4 and another decade, and if you're missing the first 10 years of your experience, that's incomplete. And so what I was referring to more of, if you do have an extensive background, make sure that you have all of your jobs in there. And if you're 5 years out, I still see the completeness of the profile. It's so interesting to see where your internship was. You never know who you're going to get in touch with, who is going, where you can bond over the internship that you had or where you worked. And it's so interesting to see, like, I'll look at some of the executives' profiles and I'll actually be curious where they came from, what was their new beginnings, and the jobs that they held. And I actually really appreciate when your kind of initial jobs are in there, and you can see that, you know, they made it, and it took time and it took resilience and all the different pivots that they've had. And it's interesting to see. So my personal advice would be just have it in there. You never know what can strike up a conversation.
Thank you. And one of the questions was talking about common pitfalls in the LinkedIn profile. Can you share about what other common pitfalls besides incompleteness?
The photo is the biggest one. It almost makes it seem, as a hiring manager, if you don't have a photo, it makes me seem like you don't care in a way, because it's such a visual thing, and especially if I'm looking at a bunch of different profiles and a bunch of resumes that come coming across my desk, I am such a visual person that I'll kind of, it adds to the memory of like who I saw, what they were doing, what experience that they had, what kind of skills they put on their profile. And it all ties together in a complete picture. And so I would say like not having a photo is a pretty big one. And then the next one is just putting your job title and no other description. At least put a sentence in of what you did, what your accomplishments were, what is a project that you were proud of, what is a challenge that you overcame or faced. Some of the things that you would potentially expect to have as an interview in the job that you're looking for. It's a great way to represent the work. The opposite side of that pitfall is 10 bullet points, each 6 sentences, where you have an essay for each one of the sections. And that's quite overwhelming as well. And then my individual pet peeve is poor grammar on LinkedIn profiles. It just reflects poorly on in like misspellings and mistakes. And so I would say less is more, and for it to be correct.
So back when I was in college, they would give people some feedback in terms of your resume and how it should be said and how it should be structured. Do you prefer past tense, present tense? Is it just present tense for your current job, or what should it be when you're writing your LinkedIn profile?
It's, you know, it's a personal style and a personal preference. For the summary, I like it in the first person because I'm talking to you. I at one point in time had it in the third person and just felt like it was really awkward and it was just not me. So I have it in the what I do because it's me. You're coming to my profile where I'm an author or I'm interviewed and my bio is there. It's much more natural for it to be in the third person. But because it's my profile, I almost feel like I wrote that and it didn't want to sound pretentious. When it comes to my current role, it would be present tense. So I'm managing a team of X people. I am running the strategy for this product. I'm XYZ, or I'm looking for opportunities in this particular area. Anything that's in the past would be the past tense. Because if it's not, it makes me feel like you didn't go back and update your profile.
Yeah, makes sense. And then in terms of, can you clarify, do you prefer paragraphs? Is it better be picked up on as bullet points where people can scan, or what's actually the better structure for the past roles?
I would say for the summary, you can have 2 paragraphs and maybe a couple of bullets especially if you have any kind of coding languages that you're including. If there's specific monetary or data-driven things that you want to put in, like businesses that you ran and the profit that you created, and etc. When it comes to the experience, it depends. You can either do 2 sentences, which is very reasonable, or 3 bullets. And so depending on what the style is, I'll go back and forth and I'll see both be very successful.
Okay, no, thank you. And let's talk about the picture, right? What are actually good photos? Is it people with a plain background? Is it with their work? Is it with smiling, non-smiling? Or how would you recommend people to optimize their photograph?
I think smiling, so it's culturally, whatever's culturally appropriate as well. So if there are certain cultures where not smiling is the more appropriate way, like being very respectful to that. But I would say from a personal preference, or from what I've seen in a wide diversity of people who I've worked with, I'd say make sure you can clearly see your face, that it's just you in the picture, because it can be a little confusing. And for there to just be good lighting and good color. Everything else is really up to you. Your hair Your dress code should reflect your personal style, and then your background should just be something that is non-distracting, I would say. And LinkedIn has some filters that you can use in order to blur out the background. But I think just even taking a photo of the way that you are now and just smiling with your Catskills photo in the back is what I'm seeing on my screen, and that would work great.
I used to live in New York City, and just with what's happening in New York, I thought that'd be an appropriate background. So
yeah, it works so great. The way I've done it is I basically took my iPhone and asked a friend on portrait mode, stood up against a bunch of different backgrounds. They took like whatever 20 different photos, and I would just choose one and used it for a long time.
And in terms of recency, do you recommend people to update their photographs every, at least past year, 3 years, 5 years, or what's your recommendation there?
I update mine every 3 years or so. And I've never done professional photographs. I've always just used iPhone photos, and they're just such great quality now. And I would say a natural photo that represents you is just great. And there are so many wonderful photos, and as I see of the little thumbnails, they're just great. And so without having a photo, you're basically seeing a gray square, which is not doing anyone put anything productive.
Cool, thank you. So let's go talk about the algorithm for, I guess, content, right? And people ask about posts that surfacing on a news feed, how often they should be posting, types of content they should be posting. Can you share more about best practices on that front?
Absolutely. And I'll also share some of the best practices afterwards as well. There are a lot of great pages that you can follow. So especially with SMB, LinkedIn has recently put a tremendous amount of initiative and education for entrepreneurs and SMBs, especially at a moment like this. So I'll make sure to send all the different types of blogs and reading, and of course, everything is free. When it comes to the feed, so it depends, truly. From a personal standpoint, so we have a couple of ways to look at how people post. So from a contribution standpoint, so from a personal preference, I post on LinkedIn when I'm usually a reposter. There are so many people in my feed who are just smart and have wonderful things to say that will do it 100 times better job than I will. And so I will love the information that they have. I will reshare it. I'll usually put a small kind of piece of my own spin or opinion on it, and that's how I'll contribute for the most part. When I was managing the LinkedIn page and some of the social media, it's something that I would do daily, just because, and it depends on your following, and of course, not everyone is coming back to LinkedIn every single day, depending on who your following will be. I would say at least 3 times a week if you're managing a page on LinkedIn and if you have a brand. And if you have a diversity of content, so if you're posting something to inspire people to apply to work for your company, if you're sharing relevant news and articles, if you're doing some sort of a fun post on like collecting opinions about best books to read and things like that. If you have a really diversified content marketing strategy, you can absolutely post more often and it'll actually be engaging. So the people that I follow, a lot of the influencers that I really appreciate their content, they'll post quite frequently, and I'll probably reshare every other post that they'll share. And so that creates amplification. When it comes to the feed at LinkedIn has been really, and I'll share a blog post, both where there's one engineering, so it really goes into depth of the back end of the algorithm, but also a more kind of for folks like me who won't really grasp as much of the back end of the algorithm. It's been really updated to create a more interpersonal. So it's prioritized among your connections. It's really the people that you know talking about the things that you care about. And so it's the things that you've reacted to in the past from the people that you care and combining those together versus some of the more like influencer stuff. And so that's where authenticity and your network, posting things that encourage a response, at mentioning people, although use that with great responsibility, make sure the person you're at mentioning is someone that you know and someone who you can have a productive conversation with. And as a best practice, don't at mention any more than 5 people. That tends to be rare.
Only 5 people, really? Okay.
No more than 5.
Why is that? Is
because
it the algorithm looking at it? Is it just that it's if you,
I,
you feel like
I think
people
it's more of
are
a, I think it's more of a best practice, because then it just is a lot. It's driving a lot of noise, and especially if you're doing it consistently and constantly, it's just like, if you're doing it across your team and you're putting in all these hashtags, it's one thing, but if it's with people that you're not as consistently interacting with, like your close
I see.
coworkers, it's a little different.
So it's use it if you're thanking people, and obviously use more than 5, which is how I tend to use it. Versus if they don't know you, you just want to mention them in case to get their attention. That's clearly not a good practice.
Right.
I see.
Yeah, so I generally wouldn't go back and like post something and then like mention the 28 people that are on the call right now.
Yeah. So talking about the content that you really like, and you've been following people who actually have a content marketing strategy, do you find the best strategies are consistent time frames where Monday's about this, Tuesday's about that, Wednesday's about this, or sometimes it's actually nice just to mix it up in terms of the time of day and the day of the week, which when people post?
I think you should absolutely mix it up, and post on weekends as well. There are a substantial number of people that'll come on weekends and catch up on stuff as well. So at least do one of the weekends and 2 of the other days. It's really when you have something good to say and interesting to say. Usually when people are starting off the week, something around productivity is great. And as you're closing out the week, um, ask for people's opinions or to share on some sort of a topic, some sort of a conversation starter, because at that point in time, they may just want to be able to share and connect. And then as you're heading into the weekend, something that's more of a Sunday New York Times kind of a thing, that still makes your brand accessible, and you're being that helpful advisor. And then if you are doing any kind of self-promotional stuff, seeding that in not as frequently, just because after a while it becomes overwhelming.
And there's clearly the articles you could write versus a post. Any suggestions on when to go to the articles versus the post? Obviously, post is much shorter, but besides that, what do you recommend in terms of, should people be writing a lot more articles as well, or should people just be focusing on posts these days?
Articles are, the ones that have come through my feed are just so incredibly thoughtful. Some of the ones that have been coming through lately on the challenges of parenting and the challenges of that entrepreneurs are going through right now. I think articles are wonderful. They're SEO indexed as well. So when you Google a specific search term, especially if you're in a niche, I would highly recommend writing articles, because you can always write your article and then you can use that as the piece of content to drive your posts. So I almost think, as you're thinking about your content strategy, kind of having your big rock pieces. So what is your brand? What represents your brand? Whether it's personal, whether it's your business that you're building, what emotion do you want people to feel? Because the emotional connection that you have with your post will also drive some of the engagement. And so it's not just dry content. And then as you're building out your content strategy, having this big rock piece of content. So whether you did a blog post, whether you have an infographic, whether you did an interview that you want to post and you want to cut up, you can then spread that out into smaller posts.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask a few questions that have been submitted here related to this.
Yeah.
One from Raghu. Do online posts /blog/podcast contribute a lot towards differentiating one's profile? How much weightage does it carry, and at what stage?
I think it does. So you have the option to connect media to your profile. And I think that's so interesting, especially if you're looking at different profiles, and it's what you're pinning. So that means that you're proud of it and you think it's relevant. It just gives an insight and a window into your experience or expertise. Like, for example, if you are, one of the questions is around engineering, someone who wanted to reposition themselves as an engineer. There are certain levels, especially if you're coming from a startup, it could be challenging to really level and benchmark the area of expertise and the level of experience that you have, especially with your code. So if you attach something like GitHub or a portfolio to your LinkedIn profile, you already are including more than just where you worked and what you did. If you were a creative person, if you've done a podcast and you were interviewed, you are then providing much more information about who you are and what you're able to do, and that you've cared to actually do that. And so I personally appreciate it, especially blog posts and podcasts.
Makes sense. Larita has a question regarding the photographs that we had mentioned. So do you think profile pictures could introduce bias into hiring decisions? Personally, that's the reason why I opted out to not put my profile picture. Thanks.
I would say, quite honestly, in this day and age, it's the experience that drives much more. And with so many companies focusing on diversity and building out the diversity and really caring about employees and people who are applying, bringing their true self to work, I would say it's actually a wonderful thing to have your profile picture there. Um, of course, depending on the region and depending on where you are, I'm not an expert in very like niche specific geographical areas, but speaking at a macro level, at a global level, and especially with just a focus on North America, there's just a tremendous amount of diversity that comes, and it's much more about what your profile speaks about you and what your experience is than what your photo is. Your photo just gives it a soul.
Okay, so we go through quite a few different questions that people have submitted. It's going to be sort of a bit of a, I guess, a yes/no answer, or something that quick to perhaps answer. Most underutilized tool or feature on LinkedIn that people should really go and dig into. What would you recommend people do?
I would say especially if you're looking to learn, joining groups and finding some really great healthy groups to join. It's a fantastic way to meet others, to be able to message them and ask them for opinions, for their guidelines. So I think that is a great tool.
Especially this day and age, everyone's at home, everyone's on their phones, people are available.
Especially in this day and age. Or you can start a group, get yourself, a little community going, and you can build yourself your own little board of directors. And I have that with my extended colleagues that I've worked with in the past. Get in touch with coworkers, invite them in. So it's just always great to have kind of that sounding board. I think skills are underutilized. I think you can add those in, but make sure you prioritize those. They're fantastic to make sure that you just, especially if you have a highly technical or a very unique skill that you've gotten certification on. And then this is something that is helpful for if you are looking from a business or entrepreneur standpoint. But LinkedIn Learning offers a lot of really fantastic courses on leadership, on mindfulness. And I would say Geoff is one of the most inspiring speakers that I know. And so even if you don't have the premium subscription, and if you just wanted to go online and search for Geoff and Compassionate Leadership, there are just some fantastic videos out there, and you can find them on YouTube. I'm sure there are other different platforms, and some of them, I think, there was even a TED Talk. I'll try to dig some up, but they're just really fantastic for shaping how you think and how you manage compassionately. And it doesn't matter if you're managing your direct reports, it can even be with the people that you're trying to build a venture relationship with.
And so the other questions was, any tips on best cold outreach strategies during need to find an investor for a startup, finding a job, cold outreach strategies? What feedback would you have for these folks?
So building your network and leveraging that network for introductions or for conversations. If you follow the venture capitalists that inspire you and the people that they follow, and understand or get an understanding of what do they care about, what kind of approach are they looking for, what kind of language resonates with them, what kind of news are they sharing, and then you can comment on what they're posting and what they're sharing. Have something smart to say in that post, or if you write an article and you're an expert in that field, you can then share your article and share it with them and see what their opinion is. And so I would say like building your network, asking for introductions, and then activating yourself. So to that point of a blog post or a podcast, how can you, in a very simple way, translate your pitch into something that is easy to grasp?
And for the most senior people who are on LinkedIn, is there a time of day that's the best way to reach them? Whether is it between meetings that they're checking LinkedIn briefly? Is it in the mornings? Is it during the time of commute, or is it throughout the day?
It depends. I mean, given the current circumstances, it's tough to say, but it varies person by person. Some people will, especially if you have families, they'll get on at 11 o'clock or over the weekends. Others will just treat it as a productivity tool the way that they would with email and Slack and chat and Teams. And so it depends. It's all around. That's why connections, introductions, the personable approaches and the thoughtful approaches and the human approaches are the ones that tend to work the best.
And so another question was about independent consulting. What's the best ways to use LinkedIn as an independent consultant? We do have quite a few members who are now doing contracting or being independent consultants. Is there a different way they should be putting their profile together or using LinkedIn?
I would say if you have a consultancy, having a company page, even for a small business, is wonderful because you can post thought leadership content there, and you can still be the face of that page as well. Building content, depending on what you're consulting on, building out your network, putting your portfolio projects on, having the people that you're consulting for rally for you and share your content as well. I think that just gives you more exposure in what you're trying to do. There are tools like Sales Navigator or Sales Navigator Lite that allow you to do that more customized outreach where you can send an email, you can import your contacts into a CRM. So there is an integration from a business tools perspective, and I'll share all of those if there are any folks that can benefit from that. But from an organic side, it comes down to building a network of champions. So not just connecting and using the custom invites to do your pitch while you're connecting to somebody, but figuring out how you can actually give your brand or your consulting service a human element and a human touch, or offer some upfront value too.
Makes sense. So I know a lot of friends who are looking for jobs, and they're looking for jobs in different types of spheres. How does someone, one of the questions which came in was, how do you actually position your profile for different types of jobs, right? Where perhaps on the business angle, you perhaps a business development person and also an account manager person, right? Should they be putting it in the same section, different sections? How do they stay focused yet be relevant for multiple jobs they're looking for?
Well, I'll pose the question back. Why are you looking at multiple jobs and not focusing on one?
Yeah. I think at this stage, it's sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. So it sounds like your advice is to be more focused versus putting your profile.
My advice would be more focused on where your skills best apply and where you can be most positioned to help. I mean, when I went into the work, I went through the first recession in 2008, and so it completely resonates with me as well, that kind of element of anything. And I completely see where that can come from. And that's where some of the keywords of where you're going and where you're coming from and your summary of anchoring on the core strengths that you have is really important. But if you're not focused, you're potentially diluting being clear about who you are and what you'd be great at if you were hired. And so if you're looking for an account development and business development and sales can actually share very similar characteristics. So that's where you take 3 different profiles of people who have those roles and see what they put and how your skills overlap and where your strengths are. So you can build up that profile, but without knowing exactly what the experience is, it takes time to to revise and iterate. But the best advice is looking at some of the other profiles and looking at some of the jobs that you're looking for. What are they putting in the job description, and what are the requirements, and what are the required skills? Because those are potentially ones that you already have, but didn't really think about putting into your profile.
That makes sense.
And
Thank
so
you.
that's something I would do as well.
So a couple of questions regarding LinkedIn Premium account. So you're paying users here, Irina. So can you talk more about the LinkedIn Premium account features, how they differ perhaps, or some people who don't know about the differences, and then how people should be looking at using it to maximize their usage of the Premium account?
So the Premium account gives you a couple of things, and it depends on which one you have, whether it's the career one or the business one. The career one, which is with the career one, which I think is what most people have, you'll have learning, and so you can have unlimited access to some of these courses. And so as you're developing your skill set, you can actually put those courses on your profile, and you can put them in as completions or certificates. There are amazing management courses and coaching, and even if you're building yourself as a consultant, you can build up your strengths in those areas and borrow some of that material to be able to make yourself better. The second is you have 5 in-mails per month, and if you're writing great in-mails, each in-mail is refunded back to you when you receive a reply. So for example, if I message you with an in-mail and then you message me back, I'll still have my 5 credits. And so that creates an incentive for these more authentic conversational emails. And then the other 2 things that are top of mind for me for premium, you tend to be indexed higher in search algorithms. And so if you're optimizing your profile, you're nailing everything, you're much more likely also to have a complete profile. You're also much more likely to be able to have all the search words in there. You're able to see for a lot of the regions, you're able to see the competitive salary data. So one of the questions was asking around the salary, so you can see and benchmark that. And then you're also able to see who's viewed your profile, which is something that you can follow up with, but it's not generally something, it's more of an insight. So if you can see someone viewed your profile, maybe you'd want to connect with them. But it's really the learning, the being able to message and being able to see some of the company stats, especially if you're job seeking.
So Zafar, Ayo, any follow-up questions regarding LinkedIn Premium? Want to make sure that you get your questions answered since you're paid members of LinkedIn. And also, if other people have questions, feel free to type it in. You can also unmute yourself and ask the question directly right now, or you can email me and message me directly if you prefer not to ask your question on camera. Here with Riti. Yeah, do you have any best practices for improving interview skills?
Practice, I think, is wonderful. If you, with your friends, with your family, it's something that is just such a it's not a natural interaction. And so if you can practice answering different questions. Interviews also depend, they range widely in the job function that you are. So most of the time engineering, especially at larger companies, have a very specific interview process or interview panel. You can always do some research and understand what type of questions you're usually asked. Are you going to be given a case? When you're going in for your first interview, my biggest tip is do some research and information about the role that you're applying for, the company. And it's always great to know or be able to, especially let's say you're applying for a business operations role at Google. And if you're going into your interview at Google, bringing examples and opportunities where the business can grow and how it can grow given the limited information that you have, you're actually bringing forward something that is not just your profile and your experience, but the fact that you've given thought to this role. Asking thoughtful questions at the end is really great too. It shows that you care. And then the biggest mistake that I see with interviews are really long answers. And so if you can practice formulating short answers that answer that question. And then you can always do a follow-up question. That would be kind of the 3 tips that I would do.
And I actually never clicked on your interview section, so it's pretty interesting. For those who also haven't explored it, LinkedIn does have an interview preps section, so definitely.
We do, and it's great, and you can go in there, and there's a ton of great tips. It was one of the resources I was going to send as well. So one of the things also LinkedIn just recently launched, we started to offer free jobs for any necessary positions to fill. So we're just receiving a ton of jobs that are being posted from all the different, from the gig economy, but also from healthcare workers to supermarkets. And so those will come up in the search as well. So you can have a wide range of jobs that come up when you're searching LinkedIn.
So in terms of using the job search features, any best practices, whether it's the title still a company, the zip code, and how should people be using it to the best of their abilities?
Setting up job alerts is really great. So when you find a couple of different jobs, setting up those job alerts will just help the jobs come to you as well. I do a combination of different things. I search for different keywords that it kind of goes back to your profile. It's a reverse engineering of your profile. If I want a sales job, I'll search for an account director and account manager and representative, global representative, and see what kind of jobs come up. A lot of times I'll search, especially if I'm willing to relocate, I'll search outside of my area and I'll apply for outside of my area. That's how I keep bouncing back between New York and California. And then follow companies that you would love to work for. One, because you eventually can connect with people that you know as you build out your network who can do a warm introduction. But 2, a lot of times recruiters will see who is following their company and will also potentially reach out that way. Because if there's already a mutual interest and you have the skill set, they'll follow you back. And you'll also be able to see the content that the company posts and cares about, so that when you do come into the interview, you would have already consumed some of that content.
No, it's really interesting looking at your profile where you had mentioned you've been working in San Francisco as well as New York and bouncing back and forth. And again, we didn't prep for this part of the question, but could you share in terms of how you went back to LinkedIn in a higher position and role? Was it someone in LinkedIn who reached out? Or was it because you sort of use LinkedIn so effectively? Or what feedback do you have for people? Obviously, there's a few people who've left Google already. Some may want to go back. How should they be learning from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. My experience is definitely an interesting one. So I grew up in New York City. I went to city school. I went to the School of Business. I worked full time, went to school full time. So it was definitely, I don't come from a well-off background, I don't come from a rich family. So I definitely did a lot of the fair share of the jobs from the very beginning. And LinkedIn helped me land every single job since I got on it in 2008. And that's how I got the job at LinkedIn the first time around. I clicked on a work with us ad, you know, the little, your picture next to the company's picture. And it's like, imagine yourself at LinkedIn. I was like, yes. And then they reached out, which is one additional misconception is you apply for jobs, just apply, and it'll come. People read them, they go places. So that misconception of if you applied, no one will hear you. But so I was at LinkedIn for about 6.5 years. Lyft had actually reached out to me on LinkedIn. They told me that they were looking for somebody with just my background because I had managed a double-sided marketplace where it was both B2B and B2C. And they were looking for somebody to come in and build out their Lyft for Business product marketing team and product marketing program. And so that's how I ended up leaving LinkedIn. But LinkedIn has always been almost a family, and we went through hyper growth together. And so I always had a tremendous amount of support to come back. And so I wanted to leave LinkedIn to understand how other companies are building businesses, to go into a different industry. After being in ad tech for about 10 years, I really wanted to have a change of scenery. And so for family reasons, I moved back to New York, and that's where I was like, I would love to see how ed tech, and ed tech is just such a fascinating industry. Highly recommend it to anyone who's looking for opportunities, or who's looking into kind of improving that. I worked for a wonderful company called Teachers Pay Teachers, also a double-sided marketplace where educators posted original content. And so it was through network and through my connections that they found out that I was moving back to California, and they reached out to me through LinkedIn and said, "Hey, we heard you may be moving back. Would you be willing to come back?" And that's where I looked at a couple of different roles, and ended up coming into the consumer side of the business, where now I oversee all of messaging on the consumer side, and so some of that B2B experience. This was my first pure consumer role. And so I leaned a lot on my B2B experience and working with the double-sided marketplaces and having the B2C side of that marketplace, and leverage that to basically come into this role.
Wonderful. So definitely click on that apply now link.
Click on the apply now. Also, just filling out pages and pages of forms is also so exhausting and demoralizing. So wherever there are kind of apply within with LinkedIn button, it really is a time saver. But what I'll do is I'll make sure that with this group, I'll share the resources around the B2B tools that we have, the pages that you can follow, the people that we have that post great content. You can always reach out to me, and I'm happy to give advice. I also have 5 premium subscriptions that I'm able to gift. And so if there's somebody in need who is looking for a job and can use that extra little bit of support, please reach out to me, and I'll do everything that I can to help.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Irina. And you can tell she's a champion of people for trying to find new great opportunities. She found it through LinkedIn as well. So she wants to share more about these tools and services that could be all helpful to all of you. Any other final pieces of advice as people are going through this stage in the economy? You went through it yourself in a financial crisis. It's going to be tough for everyone who's looking right now. What piece of advice do you have?
I'd say diversify where you can occupy your time by helping others, whether it's through volunteer work or through consultative work. Being able to get together in this forum where we potentially don't know each other, but hopefully we will get to know each other and build a close relationship. It's all really inspiring, and especially even when you need help, being able to give others help, whether it's through posting content or actually doing the work. It's a really unprecedented time. This is there was no time like this in the past, and so I am hopeful, and I'm building and inspiring for the future months. And in the meantime, use this time if you can to learn something new or to try something new. And if you're scared to post on LinkedIn, do it. It's gonna be okay. I was terrified.
SEO, writing articles.
I still am so scared. Oh, I've like authored things. I've done any kind of verbal I love, but the writing just scares me. But I'm working on being more brave. But if you can partner with somebody who's a great writer, or just post and see what kind of reactions you get. And it takes time. It takes time to build your network. It takes time to build these relationships, but it just pays off in the end because there are so many kind-hearted people out there.
And how can the Xoogler community be helpful to you and LinkedIn?
I'm continuously doing research, once again, building products that people love, and these are free products for the most part. And so we're consistently doing research and asking people for their opinions, and diverse backgrounds are incredibly valuable. And so if there are future research opportunities, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know if you're interested in whenever we're exploring our next product or feature. I may just reach out, jump on a quick call, and see what you think.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording now.
I'm good.